before I jump into this video, my apologies to those of you who regularly follow my channel. I know I've been a bit absent still. I thought I was on a thing in terms of getting back into a routine, but it turns out that 3-4 weeks of sleeping in an armchair with a broken shoulder is actually really exhausting. I would kill right now for just one decent night's sleep in a real bed, but that's not going to happen for a while. So I will try harder to get my videos out and to be present, get these out there for you, but that is the reason for my absence. Now, this is another creator that I stumbled across. He claims he's a British actor living in Sydney, I think it is. Most of his videos are more about selling you lifestyle, essentially. Do this and you'll be a better person. But he did do this video that was 10 reasons to move to Australia. A completely honest review. So I thought, why not? Let's take a look at this one and see what he has to say.
I've been living in Australia since last August. My wife's Aussie, my in-laws are Aussie, and my dog's Aussie. I'm joking. I don't have a dog. But I guess you could say I really like Australia, and I think you probably would too. And by the way, this isn't going to be one of those generic move to Australia videos where they're like, oh, there's a beach, oh, the pastries are nice, oh, it's always sunny. I'm going to let you in on some really cool things that Australia has to offer that you won't have heard before. So,
look, I know we do hear a lot of the same things from people when they talk about 10 reasons to move to Australia or the 10 best things about living in Australia, but I don't like the way he's being dismissive of other creators because they all tend to agree on the similar things. Because, of course, many people are going to talk about the beautiful beaches, particularly if you have moved to Queensland or northern New South Wales from the UK and suddenly you're seeing all this beautiful weather and you're actually able to go to the beach regularly and enjoy that whole beach lifestyle that we have in those sort of northern areas of Australia. So don't put people down just because they agree on a lot of things that are great about Australia. Not sure about the pastry side of things. I think that was just a bit of sarcasm because I've not heard anyone say, well, Australia's got the best pastries in the world. It's not something that we are known for. It's not that our pastries are horrible. It's just that it's not something unique about Australia. With that, he's basically raised the bar for himself. My expectation now is that he is going to have all these original things to say about what's great about living in Australia.
if you're looking for a change of scene, then these are my top 10 reasons why you should move to Australia. Let's get into it. Now, first of all, I think we need to be outside because while I've worked very hard on my YouTube studio here in our Aussie apartment, it's not as vibey as the outdoors. So let's go. Bloody love it out here. Just before we start, I know that it's not feasible for everyone to just up and move to a whole different country. You might have responsibilities to your family, to your job, to, you know, older parents. Like, I totally get that. And also, it can be expensive to move at first. My wife and I have the luxury of having not really any responsibilities other than, you know, spending time with our loved ones, which we can do if we catch a flight every now and then. It's definitely cheaper to live here in Brisbane than a lot of the UK. I say a lot because obviously there are parts of the UK that are probably cheaper to live than Brisbane City, Australia. We lived in London in a tiny one-bed flat, like really, really small, black mold, everything was breaking in it, and we were paying more than we are paying for this lovely spacious two-bed apartment with this gorgeous view with like palm trees all around. And it actually got to the point when we were in London where we were miserable. We had seasonal affective disorder. We were just working all the time to make ends meet. and we were just so unhappy we didn't have a proper quality of life.
Okay, so I was wrong about him living in Sydney for starters. So, saying that it is cheaper to live here than the UK, I'm not sure if that's an overly original thing to come up with. He was saying that it was going to be all super original and unique, basically. And a lot of people have said that overall it is cheaper to live in Australia, unless of course you move to Sydney. One thing in there that was a good point, which he didn't really emphasise, was the fact in terms of rent, what you're paying for in terms of rentals in the UK is going to be smaller anyway, just because that's what housing is like in the UK. It sounds like it would be a bit dark and damp too. Here in Australia, there are tenancy laws which mean that if you have mould in your house, you are protected and your landlord would have to fix that. But of course, probably the only places you are likely to have mould, or maybe in like tropical areas, maybe far Northern Territory, I don't know. But in terms of cold, damp, rising damp and all that sort of stuff, then probably Tasmania, maybe. But not overly original saying that, well, it's cheaper than the UK, because we've heard that from a few people. I think from what we've heard, anywhere is going to be cheaper than London, except perhaps Sydney. But still, it's nice and positive.
Okay, so the first thing is that the weather is pretty excellent here in Queensland.
Sorry, I thought that the cost of living thing was the first thing. Or is that like an add-on? It's not one of the top 10. Can I just comment? Everybody who moves from the UK to Australia comments on the weather. So far, not as original as he believes he is.
All year round, apart from if you're in some parts like Melbourne, where it's more like London and more temperamental. But if you're in the state of Queensland, it is hot, it is warm, it is good. It can be a downside, it can be too hot, but as long as you've got aircon or a fan, you're doing all right. Obviously there's more to life than the weather, but the weather is just virtually every day it's sunny, which as a British person I'm just not used to, because it really is quite grey and rainy in the UK. And because the weather's so good, it feels like you're on a holiday all the time, which I think makes you more productive. I think it improves work, I think it improves hanging out with family and friends.
So, I need to point out that this video is only a few weeks old. In other words, this guy's been here for maybe 4 or 5 months. So his take on Australia is somewhat limited. And let's just acknowledge that what he's saying about the weather, it is different. There are so many different climates in Australia. So yes, if you are on the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, whatever, it is going to be fairly sunny and warm most of the time. Of course, he hasn't been there in winter, so he can't exactly comment on what it is like there in winter. Yes, Melbourne can be a bit like the UK in terms of the overcast and the rain and the cold and everything. I would say Tassie is far more like that. But at the same time, it's not all super sunny and long hours of daylight and super warm all around the other states. And I think you're going to find, I've not actually been anywhere in Queensland during winter, but it does cool down a bit as far as I am aware.
The second thing is that, I can't remember who said it, someone on TikTok said this, but Australians have huge coffee privilege. Coffee here is so exceptionally good that once you've tried a cup of coffee here, nowhere will be as good. And I've had coffee in France, I've had coffee in Italy, in Japan, some of the parts of the world where the coffee is meant to be the best, but Australia makes the absolute best coffee. I don't know what it is. It's probably because their brunch culture is amazing here, and it'll make you never want to go to Costa ever again. Oh my word.
Okay, so apparently, so long as you don't mention Australian beaches, then you can mention any of the other things that pretty much every other 10 reasons to live in Australia video uses, and you're being original. Because I would imagine that the majority of videos that are the best things about Australia or reasons to live in Australia talk about the coffee. Our coffee culture is well known. He's not giving us anything new here so far.
The third thing is that the people here are generally really friendly. People in the UK are really friendly as well, but probably less likely to stop and have a chat with you. But people here, they really do fit the stereotype of being friendly, chilled, laid back. And a lot of people, when you're at a restaurant or a shopping centre, will want to have a little bit of a chat to you. And especially if you've got an accent, they'll want to find out more about you.
Yeah, we do have a bit of a fascination with accents, don't we? I am definitely one of those people that if I'm speaking to someone who has a distinctly UK accent, then I'm going to ask them where they're from. I don't know why I do it, I just do it. It's curiosity, I guess, and also I think because I do know enough people from the UK that you do that thing in your head trying to guess where they're from based on their accent, and then you want to know if you were right or not. Still, yes, Australians are super friendly. We do like to chat. So far, the points that he's made are points that you are going to see in the majority of videos from other people.
The fourth thing is that generally the pay is better here. If you do a quick Google search on this, you'll find this out for yourself. Now, this doesn't really apply to me because I make my money through acting and freelance video editing, so the pay here doesn't really affect me. It's kind of the same wherever I go. But if you do work a 9-to-5 job, generally the pay is a lot better and Aussies have a lot more disposable income, which is nice.
Again, there's nothing original in that. But yeah, from what I've heard, most professions in Australia pay better than what they do in the UK. And what you hear from so many people when they come to Australia from the UK is that while the groceries are more expensive, once you start earning money, that evens things out a little bit. Now, I'm curious that he is claiming that as an actor, he gets paid the same regardless, because there are different, I don't know if you call them unions, but different actors' guilds in Australia as there are to actors' guilds in the UK. So, no, you are not going to be paid the same as an actor in Australia as you are in the UK, to the best of my knowledge. Perhaps he just hasn't worked in Australia and is just basing it on some sort of assumption, thinking that actors are all paid the same. But it's really not the case as far as I know. Let me know if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding there's not some sort of worldwide actors union that means that if you're an actor you get paid the same whatever country you're in.
Okay, I am getting a bit too hot now, so let's go inside. Okay, we're back indoors now, away from the dangerously high UV. Fifth thing, brunch culture. Do I need to say anything else? Brunch is such a big part of the culture here, where when you catch up with friends or family, or when you want something to do, the first thing you think about is brunch, and you go out and you go get brunch. And the brunch here is amazing. There's so many like copycat Aussie cafes and brunch spots in the UK now, because people are starting to let on that it's actually an amazing thing. And you'll go get an incredible coffee, you'll go eat some incredible avocado on toast, or a poke bowl, or an acai bowl, things that I hadn't even heard about before, and then I tried them, and then it's amazing. And they just take brunch really seriously here. They make sure that the coffee and the food is just super high quality. Also, the brunch is really cheap here. You can get a coffee for like £2, and you can get like a really big plate of food for like £7. So it's just so good.
Well, I'm a little bit confused because I'm not aware of much of a brunch culture here in Australia. Sure, we have a cafe culture. You want to catch up with someone, you meet them for a coffee somewhere, and maybe you might share a piece of caramel slice or something with them. But in terms of brunch culture, it's the first time I've heard anyone mentioned of it. Have I ever met someone for brunch? No. I might meet someone for lunch. I might meet someone for a coffee and have morning tea while we're having our coffee. Or if it's an afternoon thing, afternoon tea. But not a brunch thing, that's for sure. As for coffee and food prices when you eat out, definitely not cheap here in Victoria. In the last 6 months, I have probably only gone out for coffee maybe 2 or 3 times, because now when you want to go out for coffee, it's expensive. It's so much more expensive, and even little snacks like slices or something have become so expensive. So if you want to go somewhere for a coffee and a snack, you're not going to have much change out of $20 these days. So I'd be curious to know where he is going, that he is getting these El Cheapo brunches, because I'm not aware of anywhere around here in Bendigo or down in Melbourne.
Number 7 is shopping centres. They have this brand called Westfield, which you probably know if you live in the UK, because the UK has a few Westfields, big shopping centres. Well, they're Australian. If you thought the one in Shepherd's Bush was big in London, then wait until you get to Australia. The Westfield shopping centres and other brands of shopping centres they're just insane. They are ginormous. They go on for miles and miles, it feels like, with tons of shops and restaurants. They're just so fun. And I think one of the main reasons why this is the case is because a lot of Australia is very hot, so you couldn't just build a big shopping village outdoors. No one would want to go to them. When the weather's really hot here in Queensland, people either go out to places with air conditioning or stay indoors in their own air conditioning. So they've got these big air conditioned shopping centres that are just crazy, and they've got everything you could ever want inside them. They're amazing.
I can understand why, in terms of Queensland, Northern Territory, etc., why these big shopping centres are popular there in terms of being able to go shopping, and it's air conditioned and everything. But I mean, you've got Westfield everywhere. We've got Westfield down in Melbourne. There's a few in different places. It's not like, okay, over the summer, yeah, Melbourne does need aircon, but I think it's more just, it's a culture. We just have these big shopping centres. And I have to say, as someone who lived in Tasmania, I still get anxious when I go to big shopping centres here in Victoria, because shopping centres in Tassie are so itty bitty and tiny. You can't get lost in a shopping centre in Tasmania. If you go to Eastlands, which is probably the biggest one, perhaps, I mean, that's only 2 stories. And you know that you've got Coles and Woolies at one end. You just walk straight along the other end. It takes you 5 minutes to get from one end to the other. Whereas I have been lost in multiple shopping centres in Victoria and in New South Wales, because you've got levels as well. You know, you got to know which level you've parked on, and it's not just level 1 or level 2. And you've got to try and remember what shop was actually at the entrance where you came in, because otherwise, by the time you've been there a while, you've got no idea where you came in, because it is so huge. So yeah, I think it's more just a culture thing here in Australia as opposed to a weather thing. And, you know, it's the convenience of just having your parking and everything all in one spot.
Number 8 is it's generally a very safe place to live. Obviously, there's bad people and criminals wherever you go in the world, but I've seen a lot less crime and dangerous situations living in Brisbane than I have living in London or even living in the Cotswolds, which you would think is a pretty safe area of the UK. And my wife feels much safer as a woman walking on her own through the streets here than she did in London.
I have heard that knife crimes are really not good at the moment in London, and that it is actually at the moment considered not overly safe by a lot of people. I must admit, I love that we live in a country where, as a female, you can go into the big cities like Melbourne and feel completely safe walking around there on your own. I mean, my nieces live down in Melbourne, or, you know, suburbs of Melbourne, and it doesn't concern me that they catch the train down to like Central or Flinders or wherever they're needing to get off to get to where they live, because I know that they're going to be perfectly safe and they're going to get home perfectly safe, even if they do have to catch a few trains to get there. So I guess we are pretty lucky in Australia when it comes to that sort of thing.
Number 9 is the wildlife is crazy. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about cliche things, but I'm not talking about kangaroos and koalas right now. I'm talking about things like galahs, cockatoos, rainbow parakeets. I know I'm just listing off birds right now, but just to name a few, the wildlife here is like being in a tropical daydream, a tropical movie. It's incredible and it's exciting. And in the UK, we've got some amazing wildlife, but in Australia, it feels so exotic. And I'm still impressed. Like, I haven't just been living here since August. I've also spent time here on and off the last few years because my wife's Aussie, so we're visiting here to see family. It's just brilliant here. When you see a bird that is complete rainbow colours fly past your face, and that's just normal, like, it's just so cool. It's just such a cool place to live.
Okay, so it's not cliche because you haven't specifically mentioned koalas and kangaroos, but you've pretty much referred to them anyway. You've basically referred to all the exotic animals and birds that we have in Australia. So you've just put them under one big banner, which makes it not cliched. Okay then. Now, I am just going to say I would love to be able to share it, but I can't because I've got fly screens on my windows. But when I am working at my desk of a morning, quite often there'll be a couple of rosellas just out in the tree outside my window, which is always such a treat to just sit and watch them while I'm working. So I do agree, we do have some fantastic native wildlife and native birds, but it's not a unique thing. You're still being cliched, essentially.
Number 10 is, I know I was saying it's pretty hot here, but there's a climate preference for everyone. If you like snowy mountains, Australia has that. If you want hot sunny beaches, Australia has that. If you want jungle river cruises, Australia has that. If you want cooler areas, Australia has that. Australia if you look at it on a map of the world, you'll see how huge it is. So it's not just the generic, what we see in the films, where it's like hot and dusty and kangaroos bouncing around. If I wanted to go into the outback right now, I would be driving for hours and hours and hours. It would take me ages. So when we fly from the UK to Brisbane, we'll usually fly to Singapore and then Singapore to Brisbane. So we've got a layover. That flight, Singapore to Brisbane, the majority of it is flying over Australia, and it's usually like a 6 or 7 hour flight. So the majority of those 6 hours is just flying over Australia alone to get to the other side of the country.
Yeah, I saw what he did there. I'm not going to talk about the cliche things about, like, the beaches. And then what does he do for the final thing? Let's talk about the many, many climates Australia has. Well, there's the beaches. So I know that he wasn't specifically going, well, Australia's great because it's got beaches. But he snuck it in still. And yes, that is one of the great things about Australia. You can find somewhere to live that suits you climate-wise. I know for me, one of the greatest attractions of Bendigo was, the first time I came here was, I believe it was probably about May, and the weather was still really lovely. And then I came back a month or so later and the weather was still really lovely. And I was like, okay, this place is beautiful and the weather is so much nicer than Tassie weather. There's so much more sunlight. And for me, it suits me better than living in a state that is cold for 10 months of the year and overcast for 10 months of the year and you never see a lot of sunshine. Whereas there are people who prefer the colder climate. So, and of course then you've got people who love the Sunshine Coast because of it is just so sunny and warm and you've got the beaches nearby. So it is definitely a plus.
You're like, yeah, I would love to experience Aussie culture, get the coffee, see a koala, but I don't want to live in the brutal heat, then there's, you know, a change of scene for you. Also,
okay, so that brings us to the end of his video. How original were his points? Not overly. I think he believes that having gone at them sideways, so to speak, that makes them original. So instead of directly saying, well, because Australia has koalas and kangaroos, he's gone, well, Australia has just the most amazing different animals and birds. But to be honest, there's not a lot in what he said here that we haven't heard from other content creators. So maybe he's only watched one or two content creators and in his mind it is different the way he's saying it. That said, I think it was a really positive, upbeat video. Good points, but I think you could just about write this entire video based on 2 or 3 other videos from content creators. So his claims at the beginning, I'm not convinced. He hasn't shown me anything particularly new in what he's been saying. So on that note, that brings us to the end of his video. And so it brings it to the end of my video. So thanks for listening. If you are new, please subscribe to my channel. I would like to see this channel start to grow a little bit. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment. I'm really interested to know your thoughts on what this guy has said. Do you find anything overly unique in what he said? I think maybe the supermarket comment was probably the main unique thing. The rest, possibly not so much. But I'm keen to hear your comments on this, and of course, hitting like and commenting on my videos gets them out there in the algorithm, gets them seen by more people, so you're helping me to grow my channel by doing so. So thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.